Amita from the UK.
Hello, Ajahn. It's been a great pleasure to be able to listen to your talks and picking up things for my practice. Since COVID started, I think I feel I have developed my practice a bit more. And my gratitude to Beta and all the Ajahns. Thank you very much. And my gratitude to you all. Thank you.
Well, in the traditional way, we say if the best way to show your gratitude to a teacher, whether it's the Buddha or living teachers, is by practicing, putting into practice what they teach. So the way to carry on is to practice more dana, more sila, more bhavana, practice mindfulness and meditation when you can, contemplate the Dhamma as much as you can. Then the teachings become worth it. If the teacher teaches but nobody practices, it's like, oh dear, nothing, no good is coming of it. So I have to teach myself as well, and you have to go on and practice for yourself as well.
Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you so much, Amita. I'll see you next week in the UK.
Yeah, thank you, Vita. Thank you.
I'd like to now invite Suvana. Suvana was having the hands up. Suvana, could you please unmute? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Ajahn, good evening. Ajahn, I'd like to ask, how do we practice in a negative environment? As you can see in the worldly life, people are a lot of greed with them, a lot of high in tanha, you see. And we can be easily influenced by them, and sometimes we may also be behave like them, you see. So in this kind of environment, okay, how do we practice and perfect ourselves? Well, in the olden days, it can be easily that we can travel to one monastery to another monastery. But now, because of the pandemic, because of the COVID-19, our traveling also is restricted. So there are not many places actually we can go, and we have to live, in such a worldly environment, you see. So how can we perfect our practice in this place? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think many people feel the same because of COVID, travel restrictions, and so on. The movement the freedom of movement we formerly had isn't there. So, like you say, not so easy to visit teachers, temples, and places. But one other way of looking at it, like the Buddha always emphasized the importance of associating with fellow practitioners, wise, good people, seeking them out and understanding who is a wise, good person and who isn't. And of course, we live in the world and there'll be many types of people we mix with at work, in the family, and we often have no choice who we are working with, or even in our family, who we're born into a family, and what our fellow siblings and the people around us are like. We often have not much choice in that. But associating with the wise and good, that's where you have choice, in the sense, who do you give priority to? Who do you give importance and value to? So you may have a particular family member who you find you have trust and confidence in their views, their judgments. Maybe they're somebody who already has a foundation in the practice of Dhamma. So talking to them, spending time with them, following their example is good for us. We find that's a good thing. Whereas some people are not interested in the practice, they maybe don't keep sila. Okay, well, you just have to know that. You may still have to mix with them, but you don't have to follow their example because you realize they're not practicing. And the same at work, the same in society. There are those people we have no choice but to spend time with because of work or other commitments. But it doesn't mean to say we have to take their example and follow them. So we have to consciously aspire to follow the good examples of people we know, whether it's teachers or fellow lay Dhamma practitioners. Even if they're far away from us, we can still keep in touch like we are today. You know, people from all around the world can still join a session like this, listen to Dhamma, ask questions. These kind of things are still possible even in the worst situations. We usually still can contact each other through this technology. So that's a start, you know, finding similar-minded people, listening to them, following their example, getting strength and support from them. And then with other people we meet who maybe are more negative, they may have very negative outlook on life or wrong views. You know, you just know who they are, and you realize they're not the people you follow or trust or share your secrets with, or don't expect to get Dhamma from those people. But you can still have compassion for them on the basic human level. We practice kindness and compassion for everybody. But you don't treat everybody as your true Kalyana Mitta or as your good Dhamma friend, do you? You learn who the people are you can trust and learn from, and who you can't. And sometimes it's a painful process, isn't it? Sometimes we make the mistake of trusting the wrong person, and then only later we find out when they've hurt us or harmed us in some way. But still, we have to just accept that. And then we keep seeking out the good in ourselves, because when you seek out the good in yourself, it helps you to see the good in others. And that will draw you to truly good people, Kalyana Mitta, who can give you support in the practice. So Kalyana Mitta and associating with good people is an important part of the practice. But you also have to do that internally. You know, keep coming back to your own mind and finding the good in yourself, bringing that up, cultivating it, developing it. And that's what we're doing in the practice. And letting go of the negative that you see in your own heart. And then you'll recognize the good in others more quickly, and you'll see who you can trust and who is a good teacher, a good guide, or somebody who's supportive in your life.
I don't know, Paul. There is a question here, and the question is from Ray Fang, and it reads like this, Paul. With reference to the Uposatha days, is there a difference between the Thai calendar and the Chinese calendar? Which one might one follow?
There does seem to be a difference, yes. The Chinese calendar is always one day out from the Thai calendar. So I think, Beta, you just said that the full moon was yesterday, but we're having the full moon day today. But these things are conventional reality, aren't they? Calendars, time measurement systems, and so on. So, you know, whether the full moon in your calendar was yesterday or today, I'm not sure it matters too much. And maybe it's inconvenient when you have the Chinese and the Thai tradition mismatching. Sometimes it's a little inconvenient, but the important thing is the Buddha encouraged us to use the moon as a simple reminder of time, the passing of the time, and to use it to your advantage. So we have this tradition of full moon, half moon, new moon, and half moon. You have the observance days where you may dedicate your more time on the observance day to the practice. So Uposatha day, often you keep the 8 precepts, you meditate more, you set aside other activities so that you can focus on the Dhamma more. Maybe even go into a monastery on the Uposatha day, do dana, listen to Dhamma, meditate, and so on. So the important thing is, you know, use the calendar that you have to remind you to practice. And Ajahn Chah used to say, you know, it's only 4 days a month, the moon days, the observance days. In Thailand, they call them Wan Pra, it means monk day, or the holy day. You only have 4 monk days, and then you have 26 lay people days. And what happens is on those 26 lay people days, we forget all about the Dhamma, and it's, work, stress. Then because we get stressed, then we seek a way out of our stress through recreational things, entertainment, drinking, socializing, sleeping, whatever. And on those 26 lay people day, often we just forget the Buddha, forget the Dhamma. And, for some people that's the reality. And then maybe on the monk day, okay, remember the Dhamma again, do a bit more practice. And then for another week, we forget the practice. What we're trying to aim for is a consistency of practice. So of course, if we have work commitments, family commitments, we have to adapt our practice to that. And you can't expect to be always keeping the 8 precepts or on retreat if you have a job, a demanding job. But nevertheless, we still can find time every day to do some chanting, meditation, or listening to Dhamma. We still have our precepts that we use to guide us, maybe the 5 precepts on a work day when we're just trying to practice mindfulness of speech, actions, not to harm others, not to be dishonest, and so on. So just use the calendars as skillful reminders for your practice. And in the end, it doesn't matter, does it, whether it's the moon day was yesterday or today. The question is, how are you spending your time? How well are you spending your time?
Thank you, Lampa. There is a question here from Yok, and it reads, Lampa, how does one truly let go of our attachment to the people we love? Example, to our children as well as to our parents.
Well, we're getting right down to the nitty-gritty of the practice, and only a few people, the noble ones, really successfully manage this. But nevertheless, we have to keep reflecting, don't we? We have to keep bringing up the Dhamma reflections every day. The Buddha said every day you have to reflect. Separation from everyone I love and like is certain. Is one certainty in life, is that you will separate from everyone you love. Your parents, your children, your partner, your friends. You won't be together forever. So if you just bring up that wise reflection at least once a day, every day through your life, you're preparing yourself for an inevitable truth that you will separate through death. You'll die first or they'll die first. And even before that, we separate every day anyway, don't we? We go to school, we go to work, we go on holiday, we travel, we do this, we do that, and we are physically separating regularly anyway. Be mindful of that and see how it's just a natural part of life, is that we're not, even the people we love, we're not with them 24/7. People used to love Ajahn Chah because he was an arahant, and being around Ajahn Chah was good. People wanted to spend all their time with him. They felt good in his presence because his mind was so peaceful. So he's like a combination of your parent and your best friend and every good person in the world all rolled into one. So people would love to be around Ajahn Chah. So he'd spend a lot of time chasing them away, not letting them get what they want. So monks who wanted to just sit and listen to him and be with him, sometimes he'd send them away. I've got friends who they wanted to spend all their time close to Ajahn Chah, and he'd send them away to the most distant, remote, poorest little hermitage somewhere to learn not to attach too much to him. He wasn't trying to completely cut them off, but simply get them to see you can't cling to people you love all the time. You have to learn to be a refuge to yourself, practice for yourself. Then you really appreciate the people you love. If you're not clinging to them, you can appreciate them for what they are, who they are, the goodness in them, whether it's your family or your friend or your teacher. So Ajahn Chah didn't teach anyone to cling to him. He taught people to treat each other with respect, kindness, and compassion, but not to cling, because clinging comes from ignorance. And where there's ignorance, there'll be suffering. So we suffer over our clinging to our parents, our children, our friends. And developing this path, developing mindfulness, insight helps us to decling, not cling, detach. So that simple reflection is a starting point. Just reflect every day. Separation from everyone I love and like, including my closest friend, closest family member, is sure. It's certain. So you bring in your mind to see the truth when you do that.
So the chant Luang Por is referring to is the chant for the subjects for frequent recollection, the 5 subjects of frequent recollection. For those who know the sutta, it's the Upajatana Sutta, Luang Por.
Could be.
AN 57. So I'll put the link in the chat group. I think in the Buddha Bodhivana Monastery's YouTube, there is a chant recorded by Luang Por on this particular recollection. So you may want to reflect upon that. Okay. The next question here is, this person, Sherry, she's recounting a conversation she has with a friend who meditates. Okay, the friend who meditates says that he can stay with the present moment when he's meditating and his mind is very focused and he's very alert on the present moment. However, he begins to lose his imagination ability, his ability to imagine and be creative, which is related to his job. And every time when he tries to develop the imagination, he falls back to observing his thoughts, his feeling, and his breathing. So Sherry's question to Luang Por would be, may Luang Por please give some advice on how to deal with such a situation?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's quite a common scenario. I think many people practice mindfulness and they do become a little bit more mindful, turn to one particular object such as the breath, and then they become calm, but then they go to dullness. So we're also training the wisdom faculty or our intelligence as well in our practice, and that we shouldn't neglect that. And the Buddha always said we have to balance these different faculties of mindfulness, samadhi, energy, and intelligence or wisdom. And the creative, imaginative side of our mind comes partly through our intelligence. But what helps to free intelligence to work well and the creative side of the mind to work well is the practice of mindfulness. But you have to be sharp enough to see when you're going towards dullness and train yourself in contemplation and turning your mind to pay attention to maybe thinking skillfully or creating skillfully, especially if it's to do with your job. So you might say there's a time and place for everything. You know, there's a time where we need to calm down, bring the mindfulness up, settle the mind. And then there's a time where we need to think, but think skillfully, guided by mindfulness and turning to the Dhamma, developing useful skills, useful knowledge, gaining skills and using them to achieve things. So whether it's work or helping other people, that's a huge part of our life as well, and we can't neglect that. So there are those people who meditate and they always attain this state of calm, but then they go dull and they never actually go on to develop much insight. It's quite common. And we actually have to train in insight. So sometimes we have to sit down and make ourselves contemplate. That contemplation can involve just thinking things through, reasoning, looking, examining, questioning. Sometimes as our mind becomes a bit more subtle, it can be just observing the way things are, but from the place of insight, just observing arising and ceasing and the changing nature of things. But in the same way, you know, if you have a job that you have to do, one of the things you want to do is do it well, and you have to use your intelligence to do that job well. Well, you do have to use the creative side of the mind, the imagination sometimes, but guided by mindfulness. And that's something you have to train in. Earlier I was talking about contemplating the body. You know, that's something you have to train in by making yourself do it. You know, you have to think it through, visualize, look and learn from your experience. And just as much as we also have to develop the states of calm, clarity, we also have to develop wisdom and insight. For example, you read Ajahn Chah's biography, there's a famous reflection he gave about when he was a young monk, he had to learn to sew monk's robes. And our outer robe, the Sangati, is 2 layers. And it's quite an intricate way to, it's sewn. And unless you're shown by someone else, it's very difficult to work it out yourself. You can, but when you're a beginner, a novice, like for me, when I first started sewing my monk's robes, you know, I didn't know how to do it. I needed someone to sit down and explain. It was seemed to me quite complex because I didn't have a lot of skill with sewing. Ajahn Chah said when he was learning to sew this robe, he didn't have a teacher at that time. So he had to sit down in his meditation and literally work it out, visualize it, look at the robe from different angles and work out how the sewing should go, particularly the corners. When you got 2 layers of material to do corners, you know, to do them inside out like a bag and then fold them back again. He had to work all that out in his mind, in his meditation. So I just gave it as an example how you can be even creative, imaginative in your meditation to perform and complete or understand a particular task. And it's not necessarily an obstacle to developing your practice. You know, you could say it's actually a reward, a bonus from meditating. You can learn to use your mind and apply it to different tasks as long as the task is wholesome and not going to harm anybody. You can do that. And many monks learn quite a lot of skills because they've trained their mind to pay attention, to learn, acquire knowledge. They learn new skills. So like for myself at school, I wasn't very good at learning languages. I didn't have much interest, so I didn't put much effort into it. So I learned French for about 8 years, but I still didn't speak it very well. But when I became a monk, because I was training my mind and I wanted to learn Dhamma from Ajahn Chah, I learned Thai very quickly. And my family and friends were all surprised because they said, oh, you weren't much of a linguist. How come you can speak fluent Thai now? And I just said, well, it's from meditation. When you train your mind, then you can apply it to things. You can be creative, learn new things. So we shouldn't underestimate that or ignore that part of the mind. Your meditation can support that, but of course you have to train, you have to practice.
Wow, this is wonderful. We should teach meditation in school.
They should, yeah.
Yeah. Are there further questions from the floor? There are no more questions from the floor, but there is a question from someone. Savannah is asking, I'm interested in joining Lompo's retreat. How can I register? So Lompo, I think Savannah may be new. It's perhaps his first session here. Could we invite you to please talk a little bit about the retreat next week?
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought we decided that we don't actually need to register this year. Is that right?
That's correct. This is a simple, uncomplicated retreat. Just use the Zoom ID and then you have full access to the full schedule of the retreat without having to register.
Right. So that's the first thing. It's a very easily accessible retreat, which is what we want with the Dhamma. And for those technophobes or people inexperienced with Zoom and everything, you know, it just makes it a bit easier. All you have to do is talk about technophobes, and then that happens. It's a very easy retreat to join. You can just join every day, join the Zoom. And if you look at the program, you'll get the timing for wherever you are in the world, because there are people joining from different parts of the world. So they'll be on different time zones. That makes you more mindful, doesn't it? You know, oh, what time is it? They said it's 8 a.m. in Melbourne, but actually it's another time, 5 p.m. in some other part of the world or midnight in some other part of the world. The timing of the schedule in itself is already a practice of mindfulness and awareness. But anyway, the important thing is to note down the time so that you can join the meditations, the chanting, the teachings, get some benefit from it. And of course, you can do it from home or wherever you are, so you don't have to go out and risk getting COVID or whatever it is. Or, it's just at this time of the year and at this time, because of the prevalence of COVID and so on, we decided this year's retreat we'll do it online. So you also have to set up your home for a retreat, in the sense you have to set aside the time. So tell your family or friends, I'll be on retreat during these few days. I won't be answering phone calls, would be good. I'll set aside other business, other work, other activities. I'll just be focusing on my sitting, walking meditation, listening to Dhamma. That would be the ideal way to set up your retreat. You make that preparation, make those decisions ahead of time. You know where you're going to be sitting. You know where you can do a bit of walking meditation, even in a room. You set it all up, so you've got the time, you've got the place, the commitment. Then you'll get more out of it. The one danger with online retreats is, you can pick and choose. You watch a little bit, you do a little bit, and then you do something else. So you don't get very deep into your meditation. You don't get so much out of it. So I'd advise you to just clear your diary, focus on the retreat, really get a lot out of it, and then you'll benefit from it.